Bardella, former House Oversight Committee spokesman. And, Kurt, you would think that hearing, a fellow member of Congress, weeping, it's her family that's in danger because of the stupid things that people like Chip Roy say. And by the way, he's the former chief of staff to Ted Cruz, which won't surprise anyone. Here was his response. He didn't apologize. He said, I said what I said. He said, apparently some folks are freaking out that I use an old expression about finding all the rope in Texas and a tall oak tree. I meant it. We should restore order by tamping out evil actors, not turn America into an authoritarian state like Chinese communists who seek to destroy us. Blop, bloop, bloop, no apologies. Your thoughts?
When someone reveals themselves to you, it's best to believe them, Joy. Chip Roy is a racist. He is a bigot. He is part of the problem that we are facing in this country with racism turned to violence against people of color, against Asian Americans. It is that type of attitude, that type of thinking, that type of rhetoric that has us in this situation in the first place. People like Chip Roy think that people like you and I aren't good enough, aren't equal to him because we're not white, that our lives matter less than his. And he sat there today in a dais during a committee hearing about violence and hate crimes against minorities and had the audacity to bring up something that you and I know all too well has overt racist connotations. He might as well have taken out a poster and said, hey, it's okay to lynch Asian Americans in this country. He's okay with that. And the fact that afterwards, when confronted about it, he doubled down on it tells you he's not sorry. He meant what he said. Those are his words. And what's going to happen? More violence, more targeting of Asian Americans, more discrimination, more of what we've been seeing. Since 2020, we've had a 150% increase in hate crimes against Asian Americans. And those are the ones that we know of. You and I both know that most hate crimes in this country go underreported. Why? Because law enforcement is not something that you and I can trust. We saw that yesterday with that press conference. And that sheriff who, oh, surprise, it turns out the person that he called a victim, the perpetrator of these crimes, turns out that this sheriff has a history of posting racist things against Asian Americans. These are the Chip Roys of the world, and these are the people that we need to be worried about.
I think about the Republican Party, it's called the Party of Lincoln, but it's completely flipped on its head. It's sort of absorbed the old Dixiecrat line. You got Cindy Hyde-Smith, who is a United States senator who got reelected after saying she'd be front row at a hanging. The number 3 guy on the Republican side in the House called himself. Nobody called him that. He called himself David Duke without the baggage. And it was like, you should be in leadership. Put him in leadership. I mean, we now have a dozen Republicans who voted against giving the Congressional Gold Medal to the Capitol Police because they didn't like the lynch mob who showed up to hang Mike Pence called a mob. They don't like the fact they were called an insurrectionist mob. Can we just show some of the VO of the new FBI video of of what the Capitol Police had and what the Capitol Police were dealing with? These guys who Ron Johnson said love America. I mean, it's almost as if they're sort of deciding to be the 1950s Dixiecrats instead of Republicans.
I mean, I think it was also Ron Johnson who said that he looked out at that mob and he wasn't afraid, but had that been Black Lives Matter protesters, he would have been afraid. I mean, again, they're saying the quiet part out loud now, Joy. They're not even trying to hide it. They're not trying to mask their racism with coded words and coded language. They are outright being racist. And I think it's time that when we talk about them and when the media reports on them, they identify them as such. These aren't, quote unquote, conservative positions. These are racist positions. These aren't people that are saying there are both sides and equality that needs to be heard from. These are white nationalists and the rest of us who believe that racism is wrong. In the Republican Party, if you are a racist, it's cause for promotion. For everybody else, it's disqualifying.
It is bizarre.
That tells you.
It's bizarre. Kurt, you used to be a Republican. I'm sorry to cut you off, but you used to be a Republican. You're a politico like me, because if there was a strategy in it, you'd think it's wicked, but at least there's a reason for it. We're living in a country where demographically, this screen here is the future, right? We're becoming more diverse. You used to be a Republican. Republicans actually used to do pretty well with Asian Americans. Now, Asian Americans vote roughly like African Americans. You're starting to see communities that used to be open to Republicans. Muslim Americans Republicans do pretty well well with some of these communities. It's like they're trying to drive them all to the Democrats. You had Ted Cruz saying, oh, they only want to do immigration reform because they want more brown people to vote for them. Dude, you're a brown person, Ted Cruz, Rafael. So can you explain to me what you think the strategy is of becoming hardcore a white interests party for the Republicans? What could be the strategy here?
I mean, it just seems that they have decided to give in to the most radical and extreme elements of their base rather than try to change and make the moves toward progress. I remember that famous autopsy that the Republican Party did after getting shellacked and won the elections at the earlier part of last decade. And it talked about the need to have a big tent party. It talked about the need to reach out and make inroads with minorities and Hispanics and Latinos and African Americans. And here we are a decade later, and they're doing the exact opposite. They are putting everyone in a position to choose between white nationalism and anything but that. And you look at even what's going on in Georgia, part of the reason why Georgia flipped, both the Senate races as well as some very competitive House races, the Asian American community, their vote more than doubled in this election cycle in some of these races. They were the difference between winning and losing. And when you have people like Chip Roy putting on that performance today of racism, you're just sending the message to Asian Americans that there is no place for us in the Republican Party.
Yeah, and I apologize I didn't get to it, but, you have President George W. Bush declaring himself disgusted, used that word to describe the January 6th massacre. George W. Bush is further toward, my politics at this point, which is shocking for anyone who knows my previous thoughts on George W. Bush. But, yeah, he was right. It was disgusting. Kurt Bardella, thank you very much for being here, my friend. Appreciate you. And next